back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time and kick ass. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I am joined this week by one very, very cool co-host,
Nate Heininger.
And we, too, are here to talk about Doom. And that is specifically the 1993 Doom, not any of its sequels, spin-offs, the 2016 Doom, which does kick ass as well. That is a great game, too. But no, we're talking about original OG-ass Doom.
Yes, we're going way back for this one. We've been starting to sprinkle these retro games into our mix a little bit, and it's been a lot of fun. I as someone who basically played MMOs for like 15 years straight, there's an entire decade and a half of like core games that I just never played. That was why I really wanted to do Symphony of the Night, which we did a few months ago, because it was a game I missed and had always wanted to play. And if you're not playing a game for content, then what are you doing? But really, like with the show, we're moving games so fast, it's sometimes hard for me to like play games just for fun that aren't for the show. And so I've really enjoyed how we've been bringing in some of these retro games, giving me a chance to kind of go back in time and catch some of the major titles I missed. But this one actually came from you. This was your idea to do Doom. So I'm curious to hear, like, out of the multitude of retro games, and I know like within arm's reach right now, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of retro games available to you. Why Doom for us and for this show?
Yeah, I mean, I've always found this game super fascinating. We'll probably talk maybe a little more later about our specific personal histories with this game, but like, this is a game that I really only knew by reputation when I was a kid. I didn't have a PC, and so I didn't really play this in its era. But I've dabbled with Doom forever, because like, we'll talk again more about this in a minute, but like the game has been ported to everything. It's a meme. Will it run Doom? I've had 100 devices over the years that could play Doom in one form or another, and so I probably played like E1M1 like 50 times, because I've booted it up to say, hey, this thing I own runs Doom. But I've really never sat down and like played a whole lot of Doom. And so I wanted to change that. But also, I've always found that development of this, it's like significance and everything very, very interesting. The timeline here is a little bit weird. I think last year, I forget exactly when, I read the second of two books I've read about Doom. There's a really good book called Masters of Doom that came out in 2003. So pretty old by these kinds of things standards, I guess, but like not quite of the era of the game. But Masters of Doom by David Kushner is a very journalistic look at like the history of id Software and Doom, and like John Carmack and John Romero and their story. And I thought it was very interesting. I honestly loved reading about it. I thought the whole story of id Software is like fascinating. These people that made this game became legends. It's enormous impact in games, in the wider culture. And then this last year, I read John Romero's sort of autobiography, Doom Guy, Life in First Person, which is a book that tells a lot of the same story as Masters of Doom, but in a more, obviously it's, it's first person. It's his autobiography, and it's a great book. He's got a very specific voice. John Romero is, love him, hate him. I mostly love him. I think he's awesome. He does a really great job of sort of talking about like where he came from as a person, and like, there's parts of that in the first chapter about like, his young childhood is just like stuff I'd never heard before, telling the whole story of id Software. There's flaws to the book a little bit. I think, his hindsight is a little bit like rose tinted glasses. It's very clear he's sort of bending over backward, like not to name names when he has complaints about people, so it's clearly like a look back by a guy who's grown up a bit, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's a great story. Like the whole story of the development of Doom is fascinating. And then I was like, this year, I was like, we were talking about retro games to play for the show, and I was like, I've now spent far far more time reading about Doom than I ever spent playing Doom. I've got to go sit down and actually play this game front to back and like really, engage with it like that. And I'm super glad we did. This game, it absolutely kicks ass. It's so much fun to play. It's an incredible game.
I've had a ton of fun really exploring this game and really playing it for the first time. I'm really glad you recommended it. I don't know a lot of the John Romero story, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, he was one of the first sort of like celebrity video game developers, right? Like the game was almost packaged as part of like John Romero's Doom in a way.
Kind of, yeah. Again, like go read those books. They're incredible. There's a whole wider story this is a part of.
Pause the podcast, and I'm going to go and
yes, everyone pause the podcast and go read those books. Both of them. There will be a test. They're both great. I actually don't know which to recommend. I really did enjoy Doom Guy, the autobiography, but Masters of Doom also very good. So, like, big picture history. John Romero, John Carmack. John Romero is, they're both programmers. They both came up out of the like Commodore 64, Apple II era, a lot of Apple II stuff. And they both found themselves, they got to know each other, and they've both found themselves working at a company called Soft Disk in the very early days of the personal computer. Like the PC was new. It was on desks in offices. IBM, at their heyday. And
early enough, you could just name your company Soft Disk.
It had a very funny business model. So Soft Disk's whole deal was like, it was a subscription where you would kind of like subscribe to it like a magazine. And I think once a month or something, they would send you a disc and it would have different types of software on it. And some of it was just like, here's a spreadsheet app. And some of it was games. And Soft Disk would license some stuff, but they also hired developers to make stuff for their disc.
I don't think this was the same thing, but when I was thinking about this game and what we would talk about on this episode, I had like a sudden swell of memory around going to like Target or whatever it may be to look at computer games, and they would sell these like 35 great games on a single disc, and I would buy those or, have my parents buy them for me more likely, because it just seemed like such great value. It's 35 games. It's all in one disc. And then you get it home and it's just almost exclusively like non-game content. There'd be like 18 different versions of Solitaire or something like that. But you'd spend like $20, which, in the 90s, that's like $50 today for this like shovelware disc full of just shit, but I didn't really know any better. And it would be like, I could get Roller Coaster Tycoon for 40 or this thing of 30 games for 20. I'm going to buy that. But it's a business model that doesn't really exist anymore, I guess.
No, and thankfully. Although I think if you like scroll far enough down on Steam, you basically have that it's still around in a way.
I wonder what the companies, was it Major Public or was it
I think it was these like smaller companies. I don't know about like Softdisk in particular. Like I don't know exactly how they operated, but their whole deal was like every disc would have a bunch of different stuff on it. And part of that was they hired these like Apple II coders and they were like, get started making PC games, make games for the new DOS PC. This is the future. They're on people's desks and offices. People are buying these things. We got to make content for that. And the Johns like really refined their craft there. They built a larger team, but the key turning point was that at some point, so John Romero he's a great programmer. He's mostly a level designer. Like when it comes to things like Doom, like he's mostly a game design guy. John Carmack is one of the most brilliant programmers of all time, and he just had like one incredible computer insight after another that led to Doom and later Quake. But the first
and which one of them made a deal with the devil? Which one of them loved Satan?
Probably both, I'm guessing, based on the success of this game. But like,
hell yeah,
John Carmack, his first thing was he was the first person to figure out what he called adaptive tile refresh, I think, which was his way of doing smooth scrolling like a Nintendo on the PC. In fact, the first thing they did with it when he realized he could do this, like, you know, he created this tech. John Romero was like, this is a nuclear bomb going off in the PC game market. Like, you can make a Nintendo game on PC. This is insane. He made a clone called Dangerous Dave in Copyright Infringement, which was a demo of the first level of Super Mario with their, like, Dangerous Dave character from one of their previous games. And they took it to Nintendo. They actually put Mario in it. They took it to Nintendo and was like, hey, we've made Mario. Can we be your official porting company to make Mario games for the IBM PC? And Nintendo was like, no, thank you. And if you ever show this to anyone, you will be killed.
Yeah.
And
Mario, or, you know, Nintendo looking a great idea, providing more access to their content to everyone. Looking that idea right in the eye, they said firmly no. But do you know about friend codes? Can you help us make friend codes?
It just shows that, like, Nintendo's attitude has not changed since the 80s.
No.
Like, Nintendo is going to be Nintendo. Like, you know,
it's, I mean,
not just a fan game, but like somebody comes to you with a business proposal, like, you know, hey, can we figured out this unbelievable technical achievement. You don't have any idea how, like, incredibly bare bones basic PCs were in that era. Like, the idea that, like, this was the first people to be able to do free scrolling games on PC. And so they, you know, rebuffed by Nintendo, they started their own company. They broke away from Soft Disk and started their own company and made the Commander Keen games, which were they did using a shareware model, which becomes very important for Doom. Because, Nate, I know you're a PC guy. Did you buy shareware games back in the 90s?
I think so, yeah. So it's hard for me to remember, but I definitely, I mean, I was finding any and every game that I could, but I would play them for almost no time because I would end up going back to EverQuest or something like that, or Ultima Online or whatever it might be. You know, I've always, or, you know, whatever RTS I was playing at the time. Like, it's pretty much just always bouncing between RTSs and MMOs. And then I'd spend forever trying to, you know, get these other things working and then give up and go back and play EverQuest.
See, my gaming experience in that era, like, I had a Sega Genesis, but we played a lot of, we were a Mac family. And Mac gaming was never that big of a thing. Like, you know, Mac gaming was, you know, hard to do. Things, you know, compatibility was weird and spotty.
Yeah.
Games were very expensive, and they came out years later, if at all, than they came out on PC. It was just like a really bad scene. But Macs had a very unique shareware community. Lots of Mac developers, you know, made games that they would publish as shareware. And, you know, for younger listeners, shareware was a business model where you would freely distribute a limited version of your software or game online, even going back to pre-online era, via things like BBSs and users groups, where you'd say, hey, please copy my game, put it on your floppies, hand it out to your friends. Or even, as was the case with Doom, give companies free license to print discs and sell them for money without paying you a dime if they were just getting your shareware version of your game in the hands of people. So you could go into some stores and buy for very inexpensive prices, like, you know, just basically the cost of the discs, shareware games. That's how Doom got in a lot of people's hands. Or you could go and download it online, and then you'd play some portion of the game, and then the game would start showing you screens saying, hey, if you want the whole game, write me a postcard or send me a self-addressed stamped envelope or something like that. And then they would send you back a packaged version of the full game or some kind of unlock code to unlock the remainder of the content. So that was like the way that game, it was a kind of an innovation at the time. Like when id first started doing it, that was like the beginning of the shareware era, and that was like a huge distribution model for games on computers for a long time. And honestly, I think that, like, basically the shareware model didn't really truly get killed until Steam for games. Like it was petering along as, like, you know, if you were a quote unquote, what you wouldn't have called them this, but, you know, an indie developer in those eras, like shareware was like one of your best ways to potentially, also you wouldn't have said this, go viral back then, like, you know, get your games in the hands of people who would be interested in playing it, and maybe 10% of them might actually buy your thing, but, you know, it was a way to get your name out there without having to go through publishers and get your boxed copy of your game, you know, put on shelves at Walmart, which is an incredibly high bar. Anyway, so they go off, do their own thing. They make these games, the Commander Keen games, very successful. But then Carmack, being a brilliant brain genius, starts experimenting with 3D. And obviously, the first 3D first-person shooter they make was not Doom. It was Wolfenstein 3D, which was also a huge hit and a huge success. But it's much, much, much more primitive than this. So, like, there's a lot of weird limitations with Wolfenstein 3D. It's still fast. It's still fun. I've played through quite a bit of it. I don't think I've ever beaten it, but I've gotten as far as the final boss of Hitler in that game back in the day. Mecha Hitler. He's like in a big mech suit.
We need to bring back Hitler as the final boss of video games.
Yes.
Bring back Hitler as the boss. Come on. What are we doing?
I mean, there's some good remakes, or not remakes, like the modern, you know, Wolfenstein games.
Yeah.
I haven't played a ton of those, but
yeah,
shooting Nazis is never bad. In or out of games. But that game was a pretty big success. Again, shareware thing. But then, of course, they moved on to, they wanted to make a new game, Doom. The whole development story is very long and detailed and interesting. They had all these ambitions about the story that they eventually jettisoned, realizing that really this game is about speed and brutality and ultra violence and just fun. And so, like, this is a very stripped down game. We should probably talk about its story or lack thereof in a minute. But the big tech innovation here, what Carmack figured out, was this was the first game to use a technique that had actually been, like, talked about and, like, had academic papers written about it and stuff for like a decade prior to this, called binary space partitioning. So the problem in that era, you know, when you're drawing a 3D scene on the screen, right? Your computer has to look at every pixel on the screen and figure out what to put there. And if you have a 3D space with lots of different things, so you've got walls, you know, in this game, let's say like you're looking at E1M1, that first screen, there's pillars, there's a sort of a recessed floor area in front of you. Off in the distance, there's sort of an alcove with a spinning thing with the like armor in it for you to go and pick up. There's windows. Out that window, you can see a skybox in the background with mountains. So many layers, right? So many things. And the traditional approach to drawing a scene in 3D was back to front, because you would have to, you know, if you were going to draw all of these different objects, you know, it would be hard for the computer to know before it started rendering what would have to be in front of what in order for you to have things overlap and look correct. So they would just draw the background, draw the next thing in line, draw the next thing in line. And that takes an enormous amount of time. And computers of that era just simply couldn't hack it. You know, drawing a scene that way, it would spend most of its time drawing the back sides of pillars and things. Like it just, It wouldn't work. So binary space partitioning is this really pretty brilliant approach where basically it's a way of kind of pre-calculating in advance what is going to be in front of what, and being able to draw the scene front to back, so it doesn't ever have to draw anything that you can't see. And it works in a really interesting way. There's like YouTube videos that go into the math of this and stuff. It's pretty fascinating, but basically it just like takes the whole map and starts subdividing it into equal parts and smaller parts and smaller parts until you get down to the point where there are tiny zones, and each zone, it pre-calculates what would be occluding what in each zone. So it just knows in advance, and it has a simple sort of binary tree that it can walk down in order to just look up pre-calculated information about what should be in front of what. Really smart. A lot of really clever development stuff went on with this game. Like, this is also a game where they did cross-development. They developed the game on next step machines and then deployed it on DOS. Fascinating stuff. Like, read the books. Really neat. Like, anyway, fascinating, absolutely brilliant tech wizardry was happening with this. When people booted this game up, they were like, is this virtual reality on my PC that I run
train's coming
VisiCalc
right for me?
on? Like, it's insane. It's an insane technical achievement. And it has all these limitations. People look back on it today and say things like, this is not really a 3D game, it's 2D, which I think is actually an oversimplification. Like, this is a 3D game.
Yeah.
It uses 2D
what are you trying
sprites,
to prove?
Yeah.
Who are you arguing with when you say this isn't actually 3D? Like,
yeah.
Whatever.
So, fascinating game, fascinating development story. The whole story of how the team then goes off the rails with Quake and with their later career, also very, very interesting. So can't recommend these books enough, but also just like playing this game, it gives you a bit of that feeling of like, what was it like if the only game you'd ever played on your like $5,000 PC was like Solitaire, or maybe if you were lucky, like Dangerous Dave, right? And then you boot up Doom, right? Like,
yeah.
Can you imagine insanity? This game is insane. It's so much fun too. So, like, Nate, obviously I've talked too much already about like why we chose to play this game. And I mean, the other reason that we didn't say for why we chose to play this game is about 10 hours long if you really explore it. Like, we're talking about Doom. It's 3 episodes. There was a 4th episode that came out in the sort of like a retail release of Doom called Ultimate Doom. So technically 4 episodes, but like each episode is like 8 levels, I think.
8.
So not that long.
No, and some of these can be beat in literally seconds, if not minutes. Obviously, some of that you will need to practice a little bit, but like it really can be like a couple, especially early on, some of these levels are like 2-3 minutes, right? So I think the low end on how long to beat is 5 hours, and I suspect that's probably closer to most people's like total time spent beating this game. Probably
and a relevant to the show, like this game is like widely credited with starting speedrunning as a concept, because they built in, almost as an afterthought, a feature where you could record your actions in the game as a demo file that was literally just basically like a file that recorded like, when you clicked your mouse and when you hit which arrow keys and that sort of thing. But because these were tiny, they could be shared online. And so there were websites that cropped up even in the incredibly like proto early internet era where people would share their speed demos of, and so it became like speed running wasn't like completely unheard of as a concept, but this is where it kind of like got legs as a thing, as like a community and like a thing people were doing.
What's interesting was, because I also noticed the game implies that speed is maybe the ideal way to play it, and it expects you to play it a lot, because on your final you get a great score screen at the end of each level that gives you like what percent of enemies you killed, and also what your level time was and what the par for that level was. I was curious if that was from the original game or if that was something that had been added. I played the Steam release that's just called Doom 1993, and it certainly felt like I was playing the original, but I wasn't quite sure if there had been any things like that added. Was that in the original game too?
That definitely was. The developers like decided on those par times. They were based on their like, I think they did like a average time of the developers like fastest times and then like added something to it or something. Like they had some scheme for how they did it.
So right out of the gates, you're like, they want me to go fast and they want me to play these levels again and like try to beat par, because I'm not getting par on my first run through of any level. But I imagine going back it wouldn't be too difficult, because some of these levels seem big, but if you know what you're doing, you can get through it in like 30 seconds or whatever. Par might be a minute or 2 minutes on some of these early levels.
Yeah, so I think some of the longest par times I saw were like 3 to 5 minutes. Like they're definitely, it's designed around playing for speed, and that's like one of the key design goals of this game. Was like they wanted to take what they did with with Wolfenstein and things like that, and like turn it up to 11, and speed was like one of the main axes for that change,
which is a pretty bold stroke, because it's not like it's not just a crazy 3D shooter, Hail Satan, etc. It also wants you to go fast.
I know.
Which, like, having not played this when I was a kid, or at least I don't think I did. I don't remember playing this. I think probably my parents thought I would go to hell if I played it, and so I wasn't allowed to have it. Although I did play a ton of a game called Heretic, which was only accessible. You could only boot it up through DOS. And I didn't know that it came on the computer, and I don't think my parents knew it came on the computer. And so it felt sort of this like secret, like, ooh, I go into DOS and boot up this game called Heretic, which was like an off-brand Doom that was kind of
it was licensed. They licensed the Doom engine, so it was, okay. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about this. Like, this game fundamentally started the first-person shooter as a genre. Like, there were first-person games before this. There were actually quite a lot of first-person games in the RPG genre, but like dungeon crawler type of stuff. But this, to a lesser extent, Wolfenstein, but like this really started the first-person shooter genre, and it was so widely imitated that like for the first 5-ish years of the entire history of the genre, the name first-person shooter just didn't exist. People just called them Doom clones. And like it wasn't until like 1999 or 2000 or something that the phrase first person shooter kind of overtook Doom clone as like the name for this genre. The other thing that this game like really introduced that's wild, and I really wanted to see if we could do as a podcast, but we didn't quite make it happen. So maybe listeners, maybe you would like to help me make this happen, is this game introduced online multiplayer in a like sorry, it's certainly not the first game to have online multiplayer, but it's certainly the fact that this is so, there's so many firsts here. This is the origin of the term deathmatch. It is one of, if not the first, I'm sure there's antecedents, there always are, but like this is basically the beginning of like first person online multiplayer. And it didn't actually technically have online multiplayer. It had networked play. Like you could connect multiple PCs together and have up to 4 people doing a deathmatch. And you could either like play through the campaign cooperatively, or you could shoot and kill each other. And that was added as almost an afterthought near the end of development, but it ended up being like one of the most popular things about this game. It just, deathmatch was massive. It was like a, enormous thing.
Quake Online. Mm-hmm. And then I also, this is a little while later, but not that much later, I was really big into Counter-Strike, like 1.0, which is obviously, like took the genre and expanded it significantly. But like I played a lot of first-person shooters in the 90s, and I guess I didn't realize how much I had Doom to thank for that.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of weird to think about the history there, too, because like the internet didn't, like, not everybody had it. People were downloading Doom, a lot of them off of BBSs, which is sort of like, early proto-internet. People would dial up to, like, central servers, bulletin board servers, like, directly connect via phone line rather than networked over the internet. And this is a bit of a weird thing, but, like, so the way that people eventually got around the fact that this could only play local network play was there was a thing called Dwango, which was a online service. Kind of think of it as like a dial-up service exclusively for playing Doom. It stood for like Doom Wide Area Network something. Yes. I don't know. But Dwango was like a service that you would pay like $5 a minute for, or something like that, some absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
But people were astonished that you could just hop on, type with chats with people, and hop into a Doom game with them. It was incredible. And I found out recently that the guy who started Dwango is like a friend of my elderly uncle. I thought that was super weird.
What?
Yeah, just like a weird, it came up in conversation with my uncle, who's this like old lawyer who worked for the power company. But these are all Texas people. Like Dwango was Texas based. They were in Dallas.
When you say it now, it sounds like a Texas word.
I know, right? I love the word
Just
Dwango.
Go on south of Dwango.
Uh-huh. Yeah, wild. Dwango no longer exists, but weirdly enough, they spun off their Japanese arm, and the Dwango Japan still exists and owns Spike Chunsoft. Like they're still around.
Spike Chunsoft?
Oh, they're like a middle tier Japanese game developer / publisher. They do a lot of like RPGs, like JRPG stuff.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so the game. What do we say about playing Doom in 2023? It's fun, but what do we say about it?
It is a ton of fun. So having not played this before, at least not remembering playing it, which is, about as likely. There was a number of things that like really stood out to me. One was the speed, which we already talked about. Another thing that I know is just a product of the time and what you could do with your limited controller, but something that I really loved, and I kind of wish, maybe it's just because I'm bad at first-person shooters, but I love, you just have your mouse and keyboard. I played it on Steam Deck, but I actually played it docked with a mouse and keyboard on my nice new monitor. Thanks again, patrons. And, it's a fixed crosshair. Right, you can only just sort of look left and right. You can't aim at all. You can just point straight forward.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because we played a different version of the game. The original version of the game, you couldn't look up and down. Does the Steam version let you look up and down?
No, I could not look up and down. And at first, that feels super bizarre because obviously you've been playing games for 30 years now, and for quite a long time, being able to look up and down has been solved. But in this one, you could not. And so, but the enemies are at multiple levels. You would think that if you can't look up and down, then you would think the enemies would always be coming at you perfectly down the center of the screen, right? But it's not. There's actually verticality to the game. Enemies will be above and below you. And to solve for that, all you have to do is just point your gun in their general direction. And whether they are above or below your crosshair doesn't really matter. You'll shoot them. And so it really made...
Yeah, I've seen it referred to as like all the enemies in Doom are like infinitely tall columns.
Yeah. Like it's like a hit scan, and you just have to be vertically aligned with them, right? And I found that really fun, actually. You would think it would be kind of like feel old or feel slow or stupid or something like that, but it actually was pretty satisfying, and I enjoyed being able to like walk into a room and just sort of spin left to right, shooting things that were above and below and in front of me, all in one sort of just like hail of gunfire without having to worry about like actually looking up and clicking and aiming and all that stuff that I'm not great at in first-person shooters. And it really lends itself to that speed. So I'm sure at the time that just felt like, well, it's what we have to do. But it actually aged really well for me. Like I just had fun entering into a room full of monsters or other Doom guys or whatever the hell's going on, and it's just like a firefight and you're just running in circles shooting. So I found that really fun. I also loved how much this game just loves to make you think you're in a safe spot and then just go like blah,
and then the monster closet's open.
Yeah, here's 10 guys and they are on you. Like they are, this door opened directly behind you, and there's like 10 guys with shotguns right behind you. I was expecting whenever we go back, whenever you play these retro games, you expect them to feel kind of clunky. You expect like, oh, first person shooting has become so refined with dual sticks. I'm expecting this to feel clunky and hard, and not hard in like a fun way, but hard and like how did they do this back then? And I felt none of that. It was just immediately like, this is tight. I love just running around shooting these monsters. Hail Satan! It was great.
Absolutely, I agree. Like that. So about the aiming thing. So I played this a little differently. I wanted to tweak it, right? And the nice thing about Doom is that like in 1997 or so, like John Carmack is like a huge open source enthusiast, I guess, or like believer in open source software. And he has open sourced basically all of his tech whenever it sort of ceased to be immediately commercially relevant. And so like, this game came out in 1983, like 5 years later, they open sourced the Doom engine, which was an incredible gift to the world because it's been ported to everything forever, ever since. And there are many different source ports, which is what they refer to when you have like a modern implementation where they take that original source code of the game and port it to new stuff. The Steam version, they've taken Doom and ported it to Unity, the Unity engine that you use for like Firewatch and stuff, super common. But there's another really common open source like Doom implementation, I guess, called GZ Doom. There's several of these, but GZ Doom is probably the most popular because it's incredibly tweakable and hackable. And so I decided to play that because I wanted to tweak some of the settings and whatnot. And it, by default, does let you look up and down.
How freeing.
Totally. But it does keep the aiming thing. So if you are anywhere on the vertical axis of an enemy, you're shooting them. And I really liked that approach because it did seem a little weird to me initially to not be able to look up and down. I mean, I probably would have gotten used to it, and I agree. It is part of the experience a little bit. But I was happy to be able to not have to do that. Yeah. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, there were times because there is some I don't know if puzzle is the right word for it, but there is some looking around for stuff elements of this game, right? Mm-hmm. And I certainly would have enjoyed more freedom to be able to look around at stuff. Mm-hmm. But fortunately, everything that you have to interact with is generally big and center screen because that's all you could do. But I got used to it pretty quickly of just being able and it simplifies it. It makes it I know everything that I really need to look at is going to be right dead eye level. And that was kind of nice, too.
There's so many things about this game that were kind of felt shockingly modern, even though they were part of the original game. And the other things that really stuck out at me were the auto mapping. The map screen in this game is incredible. At any time, at least with the version I was playing, you could hit the tab key and it pulls up a full screen map. It does not pause the action of the game, so you can only do this if you're in a safe space, basically. But or they're not going to trigger you. Right, safe space. Sorry, bad joke. Wow, the demons. But if you're in a place where you can look at the map, you hit tab and it pulls up a full screen map that. It's not like some hand-drawn thing. This is a live map generated based on the geometry of the level. And it's just like a 2D, almost like wireframe. And it uses things like color coding to indicate things like secret rooms. It's a really well-done map. And it's basically if you've looked at a wall, it gets drawn in. And if you haven't, it doesn't. And there are times where okay, I've cleared this whole space out. I just need to get across the map. You could toggle into the map screen. And because this game doesn't ever require jumping, because, again, limitations of the era, GZ Doom does have a jump button, but it is useless because there's no jumping required in any of these levels. You can just turn on the map screen and just drive that way. It almost feels like playing a top-down racing game.
Oh, funny. Yeah, I never did that, but I did definitely recognize I could move around while in the map screen, and I would do that a little bit, but I never, navigated via map real time like that.
I actually found it super useful in those times when you cleared out a level for the most part and you were just sort of wanted to get over there and explore and got across the whole level. You can even hit E to open doors while you're in the map screen. It's cool. And I thought it was I don't see that now. It felt very modern. The fact that it was live generating the map as I walked was super cool.
Well, it's kind of like Animal Well, right? We just did Animal Well and
Doom. That's kind of like Animal Well.
Isn't it live generating?
Yeah, I mean, sure. It was not my first thought, but sure. That was really modern.
I only remember the last 3 games that we've played for this show, so Animal Well is still dead center in my mind right now.
Yeah. The other thing that really stuck out to me was just the level design. The levels felt really well designed. It's very possible to go back and play games of this era and just feel man, I wouldn't do that today. I wouldn't build it that way today. But the levels here are really smart. There's a lot of the kind of stuff that you see a lot of in modern games, little level design rules I need to go over there, and you can see the end of the level from where you're standing at the beginning of the level. But there's complicated stuff that requires you circumnavigating it a bunch to go and activate switches or whatnot. Opening up shortcuts to go back to places that you've been before. Smart design. And like sightline stuff, like, you know, things like, oh, I'm walking down a hallway that if I'm not being observant looks perfectly safe, but actually there are corridors off to the side or something, and, you know, monsters are going to jump out at me. Like a lot of the design of the level feels really play tested, really smart. I know that, like, based on what I've read about the story of the development, like they mostly just sort of like played their levels again and again. But like one of the strengths that like of their development style was like part of the reason they did the whole cross development thing, where they would build the game on these super fast, ultra advanced next step workstations that cost like more than a car at the time, and then deploy the game to the DOS machines rather than developing directly on the Windows or on the DOS PCs. Was it let them do this like super fast iteration where they could like generate something, tweak something, run it, tweak something, run it. And so you could really get the feel of that, like they really paid attention to details and they really put a lot of work into making levels that would be fun to play, rather than just being, you know, hallways full of monsters. It's not just hallways full of monsters.
There are a lot of hallways full of monsters, though. But it's not just hallways full of monsters. There are pentagrams.
There are pentagrams.
Like acid pits full of monsters, elevators full of monsters, like big metal door areas full of monsters. I mean, it's mostly stuff full of monsters, but there's a lot of variety of how those monsters are served to you.
It gets more and more abstract as you play through the game, which is something I really like about it. Like, you know, you have the feeling with the game, and sort of the like implicit story of the game is that you're descending from this, you know, moon base through, you know, that's become corrupted by demonic forces, eventually through into hell itself. And the levels get stranger and stranger the longer you play. Yeah, and John Romero like really brags in his book about how he invented abstract level design, and that's his name for his design style. And you know, it's a little grandiloquent when he talks about it, but like he's got something there. Like, you know, there's some of the early levels do have a little bit of that element of like trying to feel like an actual place, and that's a really powerful thing in level design. But it's also cool when like the wheels come off and you are in a space that seems like maybe it was once, you know, a useful space that's part of the moon base, but now it has become a weird, fucked up pentagram, you know, ritual space for summoning barons of hell, you know, like, and you know, this is all done with like incredibly just like minimalistic geometry, but like the feel of that is there, and that's cool.
Yeah. Hey, Reagan, you know what is also quite grandiloquent?
What?
Using the word grandiloquent. Nice job.
Nice. You know, we try. We podcasting, baby. So, other thing I didn't want to get away from this without talking about is like how good the monsters are in this, man.
Yeah.
This is some good ass monsters.
Just the overall design, from the monsters to the music to the sound, everything. I loved it immediately. Just like, hell yeah, it still holds up. I loved like the weird big pink bull monster things that you face, you know, in the middle of the first, I think probably level 3 or 4, they start showing up. The invisible guys. They're all so weird and kind of bulbous, and
all of these have names, and some of the names are incredible. So those guys I think are called Pinky Demons. The famous, most iconic is the Cacodemon from Doom. The floating, they look like beholders from D&D, red with a single green glowing eye, and they shoot fireballs at you, and they have horns and everything. I also really like the Baron of Hell. He's the guy who looks like he's wearing cargo pants and shoots like green balls of fire at you. He's like a big muscular demon with red horn, you know, red upper torso, and like pants that look like he's wearing khakis.
So many good little sound bites from this episode. I too love the Baron of Hell.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think. There's like those floating skull guys; those are great. They're, you know, simple stuff like dudes with shotguns and stuff. There's the spider demons.
What are the fireball shooting guys? Just like right out of the gates. What are those names?
Oh, I think those are incubuses or something. Let me check the list here. There's a guy, I think he's only in Doom 2, called a mancubus, and I just love that name, mancubus. You could tell these guys were listening to a lot of metal when they were making these games.
Yeah, hell yeah. I think they were imps.
Imps, that's
about.
it. Yeah. That's it. Oh, here's the list. There's the former human sergeant. Basically, I think those are the shotgun guys. The imps, those are the brown guys that throw fireballs. Demons, I think that's the Pinky Demon. I think they were called the Pinky Demon in something else. I think in this they're just referred to as Demon in the manual. The Spectre, which is the invisible demon. The Lost Soul is the floating skull. The Cacodemon, the Baron of Hell, the Cyber Demon, and the Spider Demon. And another cool thing about this is that I actually don't remember whether this came before or after things like Mortal Kombat, but they did the monsters with this by doing digitized images. So they built models of most of these, and they had artists come in and build, like, for example, the Spider Demon. They built like this incredible model made out of like metal and clay of the Spider Demon, photographed it from a bunch of different angles, digitized the photographs, and then went through and like rotoscope traced pixel art over them. Nice. And so that's why they have all these, like, they have lots of great poses for these things. Obviously, like, these characters are 2D sprites walking around in a pseudo 3D space. So like they're not ultra convincing, but they're great designs, and there's just enough of them to give you some variety. Like, it's not a ton. It's like, less than 10 different kinds of monsters in this game, but they're good monsters.
Yeah, when you have like multiple of each type on screen at one time, it can feel pretty dramatic. I like the weapons. I love that the shotgun is just like from any range. Incredible.
It's a sniping shotgun. My God. Yeah. The shotgun is hard to beat in this game. Like, sometimes you would, get the BFG or whatever they call it in this. I forget.
Like the minigun.
Or the
rocket launcher.
There's that sort of like thing that shot like energy bolts or something. I should have looked up the names of the different.
I sort of read it as like a rocket launcher sort of thing.
Well, there is a rocket launcher, but there's also a sort of a sci-fi thing that shoots little blue bolts. Right. So those are two different things, but they're all fun to use. All the weapons are good. And something that I was expecting to be short on ammo more in this, because the games of this era loved to just like, give you a specific amount of ammo in the level, and then if you didn't, have enough of it, you were just screwed. But this game dumps ammo on you. Like, you get tons of it, and like you wouldn't always have enough to like just constantly use the high, rocket launcher or something. But like, you almost never got stuck with like no shotgun ammo or something. So there were a lot of places where
you can run around just punching everything.
Oh yeah, the punch is fun too.
Yeah.
Super good game, man. I love playing this game.
This is a good game. I'm so glad that we played this. I had the same feeling as when we did do Symphony of the Night, which was just like, I'm so glad that we took the time to go back and actually play this, because I've had an absolute blast with that game, and I have so far with this game as well.
Yeah. I want to take a second, because we're getting close to the end of our time. I want to take a second to talk about the Doom scene today. I mentioned that, like, there's all these source ports, things like GZ Doom, and there's a bunch of others. Like, I don't honestly remember the names of most of them. They have things like Chocolate Doom and whatever. There's some articles, if you look them up, they have different focuses. Some of them are like more close to original Doom. Some of them are more modern, what have you. But GZ Doom, in particular, is so incredibly full-featured that it has been used as the basis for a bunch of like things that would maybe back in the day be referred to as like total conversion mods, where you can kind of use this as basically as the basis for building an entirely separate game. And back in the day, that would be things like, well, what if I wanted to build, Springfield as, with the Simpsons walking around and go blast people in that. But now people are using this as like the game engine. There's a game that just came out May 31st called Celico that is an incredible looking, very modern first-person shooter. It's with like a story and elaborate levels and looks like cool cyberpunk art, and it runs on GZ Doom. Like, it is essentially using the Doom engine to make a modern ass video game. Like, obviously GZ Doom is, decades worth of development on top of the Doom engine, but like it really shows that like this is this can be extended in incredible ways. And even still today, there are people releasing mods, levels for the game for Doom, like WADs. One of the a very insightful thing that they did early on was like this game Doom is arranged where like there's the game engine is separate from the WAD, which is short for where's all the data. It would be like it's a file that contains all the level information, all the sprites, everything, and that's stored totally separate from the game itself. And so even back in the 90s, people were creating their own level editors and releasing their own WADs, where you could generate your own Doom levels, and they've continued to get
you were dropping
more
WADs in the
elaborate.
Discord the other day.
Yeah, and they're like, even like in the last year, like incredible stuff is still coming out for Doom. Just some of the ones that I messed around with some because I was like, this is awesome. I want to try some of these things. I tried out Brutal Doom, which is like, it just basically like takes the existing original Doom levels and like spruces them up with like more brutality. So like it adds like hundreds of new death animations for different monsters and for the player. So like if you get killed by a cacodemon in this specific way, like the camera will zoom out to third person and you see the cacodemon like crush your face or something, like huge spews of blood. That stuff, love it.
I love the little face at the bottom of the screen.
Oh yeah,
as you're getting more and more beat up, you're looking more and more like shit, which I love. And then I love that when you die, you just sort of crumble to the ground as if you're just like, you're still conscious and you're just like a pile, and then you click and you restart. I don't know why I liked that little detail.
I like that too. Doom Guy in particular, like the main character of this game, is such a, like, they were very smart to keep him as sort of like a complete enigma, and he doesn't speak, obviously. He's just that face.
Yeah.
And
as someone who played a lot of Duke Nukem also, I kind of like Doom Guy just being quiet. Yeah, though I do love it.
Duke Nukem 2, and it does not aged as well.
No, it has not aged very well at all. But Duke Nukem 64, I played an absurd amount, and then Duke Nukem 3D as well. But 64 was the one I played the most of.
I played a ton of 64 as well, and my mother eventually walked in on me handing dollar bills to make the pixel art ladies shake their tatas at me, and she confiscated my CD-ROM.
Now that was real art.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh, and like just a couple of other like Doom game conversions that have come out in the last little bit that I think are worth checking out. There's a mod called Voxel Doom that came out a couple of years ago, and then early this year they released a second version of it that now includes Doom 2, where you can add this WAD to GZ Doom, and all of the 2D sprite characters become 3D voxel based sprites, and it's like super tastefully done. If it bugs you that, like, for example, when you kill a monster, they turn into a sort of 2D cardboard cutout of their corpse that like always faces the camera as you walk in circles around it. Like, if that bugs you, if the like 2D nature of many of the like stuff in the game bugs you, Voxel Doom is worth checking out. It's basically a 100% redo of all of the monsters and other elements to make them actually 3D in a way that still looks like the original game if you look at it from the right angle. It's pretty incredible. And then the other one I thought was incredible is Doom Infinite, which came out I think a year or so ago. It's still kind of in beta, but you can play it. It's like ready to go. And it is a roguelike version of Doom. So
okay, all right. Now throw in some deck building, and you're.
So there's like
there's like
stats, and you can like upgrade your guns, and it takes the original Doom levels and like tweaks them for like roguelike progression. So you're playing through like level after level on a run, trying to like level up your guns and ammo and stuff, and fighting more and more powerful monsters. And it has tons of new guns and other stuff like that's been added to it. It's incredible. It's really well presented. I played just a bit of it, but like I was super impressed. It's very polished already, and it's still only in beta. you just, you drag and drop this extra file onto GZ Doom. It reads the data from your original Doom WADs and your, and adds all this stuff onto it. And suddenly you're playing like a modern game. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So there's tons of that stuff still coming out. There's stuff like somebody made a Doom WAD last year that was like a creepypasta Doom WAD called like myhouse.wad that like looks on its surface like it's like one of those amateurish, like, let me see if I can make my house in Doom that everyone did as their first Doom level in like 1994. But then it gets weird. Like, there's still folks doing interesting stuff with Doom as a scene. It's insane how vibrant it is. I can't think of almost any other game modding community that has persisted like this. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So I love to see it. And if you're wanting to get into that stuff, like buying the Steam version of Doom is a great place to start. I'd say this is like it's a good version of Doom. You can run it on anything that Steam will run on. Runs on the Steam Deck just fine. Has like good gamepad controls, as Nate experimented with. And it's $5 full price, or right now during the Steam sale, it is $1.99. Like, cannot argue with that. Go and buy it. And then if you decide to do any of the, the wacky like Doom mod stuff that I was just talking about, like GZ Doom will just read the files from that. So you can just go and install the Steam version, download GZ Doom, and you're done. It's got everything it needs. You don't have to like drag and drop a WAD file anywhere. It just reads it from your Steam. So like, great place to start even if you decide you don't want to play that version and want to try the more like wild customizable stuff. So, get it while it's on sale. Steam sale's going on right now. $2, man. Greatest deal in all of gaming.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And hey, $5 not too bad either. So if you missed if you're in the back catalog right now listening to our show sometime in the distant future, maybe in some sort of Doom hellscape, who knows what the future holds, but hopefully you can still go back and play Doom.
Yeah. And another thing about the Steam version is that even if you don't want to like go through the hassle of figuring out how to install GZ Doom or something like that, or like figuring out where to download WADs, they've done a pretty good job curating a selection of either historically important or just generally interesting and fun WADs that are built in. You can download them through a little menu right in the Steam version of Doom, including Sigil. On I think it was the 30th anniversary of Doom or something like that, John Romero went back and made an entirely new sort of unofficial fifth episode for Doom to set between Doom 1 and Doom 2, which he called Sigil. And you can download it and play it for free from his website. He did like, a whole PC, like big box release of it, but like it's a free Doom WAD that he just did, as a thank you to the community. And that if you download the Steam version of Doom, it's got an option in there. Just go into the menu. You can play Sigil, play through Doom and then just download Sigil and keep going. It's there. And there's also a Sigil 2 now, I think, that is, I don't remember whether that's set after Doom 2 or what, but I haven't touched that at all yet. But like, incredible to see, even after 30 years, the original creator going back and like creating new content for his game.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So I had so much fun playing this game, and I had so much fun talking about it with you, Nate. and
yes.
And I had so much fun reading about this game, and just I think everything about Doom is fascinating. Like, it's so much fun to like, everything about this game is cool. Like, it's so cool. Shut up, Reagan. It's so cool.
No, I mean, I really enjoyed it as well. I think everybody who plays games, knows Doom, is familiar with its iconography and its sort of impact. I didn't know all those specifics, but obviously, like, the impact of Doom and its legacy is massive. And so I was really glad to really go back and play it. And, if you're listening and you like these sorts of episodes, you like us going into Reagan's Retro Corner and really just sitting in it, just steeping in Reagan's Retro Corner, let us know, because, I think this is something that we want to continue doing. And if you have some games you want us to play that you think would be good for the show, let us know, because there's a lot out there that obviously games during this era, almost all of them fit into our time, into our time box that we set for ourselves. Although this one was like particularly like exactly what we typically cover, and not just short, or not one of those games that's short but as long because it's really hard. It's like you can actually just pick this up and beat it in like 5 hours and feel great about it.
Yeah, it's a great one. There's a reason this game is such an incredible classic and had such a massive effect on games. And looking back on it from the position of 2023, you might think, I'm not really into first person shooters.
That's and we're in 2024, so this
is wrong. Yeah. Still writing it on my checks.
You're still writing checks?
I am. I have to write a check every 2 weeks for my lawn guy and
for your groceries.
Yeah. But it's better than you think is the thing. Like, even if you think that you're not into modern first person shooters, and I'm kind of not. Like, I don't play a lot of first person shooters.
I always want to be. I pick them up all. Like, I went through a whole. Like I said, I played Counter-Strike. I was looking it up. It's a little later than I remembered. It didn't really start until like 99, 2000. But I've like dabbled in all. I've played so many of the Call of Duties. I've played so many of the Battlefields. I played a ton of Overwatch. But I'm just always bad at them. I always want to play them. They always feel like a fun thing that I want to play. And I'm just frequently terrible. And I loved this because you just point in their general direction. You have the shotgun and you're just going to blast monsters and run around fast and probably die a lot, but you just pick right back up and get going. And I had an absolute blast. I always go in wanting to like it. I go in expecting to like it. That's my general approach to most things. But I also just anticipated a little bit of clunk and maybe just like dragginess, games of this era, everything feels draggy, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but this was quite the opposite, literally speed and fun and kick-ass soundtrack. I don't think we've done enough to highlight just how awesome the soundtrack is.
The soundtrack rules.
Yeah, and it's fantastic.
It's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. Like, this is, I didn't play on like baby difficulty. I played on whatever the like medium, the sort of default difficulty is.
I took a screenshot because this is one of the first selections you do in the entire game is you select your difficulty. So I took a picture of the difficulty settings. It's one of the first things you select. The easiest one is I'm too young to die. Then the next one up is, hey, not too rough. And then I guess the middle setting is hurt me plenty, which is great. And then the next highest is ultra violence. And then the highest is just nightmare with an exclamation point. I just love that.
Yeah, I played on Hurt Me Plenty, which is the default sort of normal mode.
Same.
And I often expect going into old games that they're going to be kind of user hostile or overly difficult. But I didn't feel that way for a minute about this. And frankly, I probably should have turned it up. Probably not to Nightmare, but I think I might even have enjoyed it more on whatever the step up from that was, Ultra Violence. Because like there were times where like, it got a little sweaty a couple of times, but it was pretty rare that I actually straight up like got annihilated by dudes. And you also have free save options. Like you can do like quick save or whatever anytime. So there were times where I'd get killed and like have to start the level over, but I was doing, I was saving at like major milestones, like when I got a card or something, and you can do multiple versions of your saves and stuff. So
I should have done that.
Too hard for you.
I died a fair amount, but I also wasn't making any effort to make it like easier for myself in that way. I would just die and just start the level over and lose all my bullets and gear and whatnot. I'm just like, whatever, I'll get it again. It's not that big of a deal, So I was probably, I think had I played it a little more strategically and saved after getting key cards and whatnot, I probably would have died considerably less. But I was really just trying to like, I'm going to lean into what this game wants me to do, and I'm just going to run around frantically firing at everything and see how quickly I can get through levels.
Well, I'm not sure what else there is to say other than that I strongly recommend this game to people.
Yeah.
I think it is a lot of fun, even in a modern context. I think you can play this on literally anything. Go and grab doom.wad from whatever your legitimate, I think you can get this on GOG and Steam. I think it's still available as a port to most consoles. One of the nice things, I'm pretty sure this is on Game Pass because this is like isn't id owned by Microsoft somehow now? I'm pretty sure.
Probably.
Yeah.
Or like Disney or something. It's all filters up to Disney now.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's all part of the hell stew of American IP culture. But it's so worth playing. And because it's been ported to literally everything, like, you really can just choose how you feel like playing Doom. Do you feel like playing the OG Doom with some like incredibly like restrictive but kind of the era like settings? You want it in the 4:3 window on your screen. You can customize everything. I had a weird experience. I don't know, didn't know where to drop this in the episode, but I had this really weird experience with this game where like I started with the GZ Doom source port, and I have a 144 hertz refresh 27-inch monitor, 1440p, and I started playing on that.
Cool flex.
I'm not trying to flex. I'm just sort of like technically speaking. So I played this, and it was literally going the max, because this game will run on a potato. This is going at the maximum refresh rate of my monitor, and at a large size, and something about the like default field of view, the like bob that your character does as he runs. As you're running, it has this sort of like vertical bob to the screen, and just sort of like the like weird, I felt like kind of slidiness of it. It gave me incredible motion sickness. Like I got incredibly nauseous playing the first level, like to the point where I had to turn it off. And I was like, well, what the hell?
Maybe it was all the pentagrams.
I mean, it definitely was. What worked for me was I set a frame rate limit, changed the FOV a little bit, and adjusted so I limited it to 60 FPS, widened the field of view, and turned the bob down a little bit. And one of the nice things about GZ Doom is like everything is tweakable. And so I was able to do all of that stuff, and instantly it was fine. Got rid of that problem entirely. Cool. So if you run into that, I guess, be prepared. Something about it just made me fucking sick. It was so weird. That never, I get that with VR.
Yeah,
that never happened to me with a 2D game, ever. So really weird, but it was immediately fixable. So strange experience.
Well, I'm glad those options were available to you. Yeah.
All right.
Cool game, man. I'm glad we did it.
Game, man.
Yep.
Yeah, we've been talking for an hour over and change now, so we don't have time for what's making us happy this week. Although I'll say that my recommendation would be the books that I mentioned, the Doom books. Yeah. They're both great. Doom Guy Life in First Person by John Romero is a good autobiography, worth reading. And I liked the audiobook because he narrates it himself.
Cool. I've been reading Dune, Messiah, so I'm like kind of close.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much the same.
Similar sounding words.
Mm-hmm. Totally. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on this retro episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at shortgame.fm. That's the website with all the links and buttons to all the places where our podcast lives, including social media and all the podcast platforms. Links to our page where you can search our show notes, and also to our Patreon. This podcast is supported by the patrons. If you like the show, the number one thing you can do to tell us so is to support our show on Patreon. Every one of those patrons makes a huge difference to the show. It lets us help defer the cost of buying games for the show, which is not insignificant since we're doing generally a game a week among 4 people. It helps us defer the cost of hardware upgrades and just the hosting of the show, which is not all that cheap either. So lots of those sorts of little things. It really does help keep the show running and the wheels turning. But it also gives you access to our Discord, which is one of the best things about this show. So if you join our Patreon, you get instantly invited to the Discord, and we would love to chat with you about Doom, about other short games, about not short games, whatever you're into, man. It's a good community. We love to talk about games there, so come join us. Lots of like-minded folks there recommending things. And it's also the best way to suggest games. So we would love to hear your suggestions for future retro episodes. If you have a short retro game that you think would fit our format and that everyone should play, come talk to us about it, and we would love to hear you. You can find also my social media presence is linked on there. I'm Reagan Kelly.
I'm Nate Heininger.
And thanks once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.